Welcome, friend. Today's story is one of quiet strength, healing after heartbreak, and the kind of love that doesn't come crashing in, but grows gently, in the presence of grace. If you've ever walked through the ache of loneliness, or wondered where God is in the silence, this story is for you. Two people who have been through the fire. Both are learning what it means to stand again. Not by might. Not by perfect people or endings. But a daily seeking and mending. Of hearts, wounds, and sometimes traumas. By the steady, unconditional love of Jesus. Sit back, take a breath, and let the story unfold. The folding chairs in the fellowship hall had never been comfortable, but Noelle didn't mind. She liked the awkward clinking of plastic silverware, the aroma of weak coffee and the sweet vanilla-y flavor of the syrup, and the warmth that enveloped all who entered this little country church. She poured herself some orange juice from a plastic jug and glanced around for a seat. Most of the tables were filled with families, couples, or longtime friends already mid-conversation. Then she spotted an open chair next to a tall, thoughtful-looking man eating pancakes like it was his first real meal all week. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, holding her tray in both hands. He looked up, startled, then smiled. "Please do. I promise I only talk during commercial breaks." She chuckled and sat down. "Lucky for you, there are no commercials during a church breakfast." "That's what I thought," he grinned, wiping his hands on a napkin before extending one. "I'm Isaac." "Noelle. Nice to meet you." They began with small talk, what they did for work, how long they'd been attending the church. Isaac had only been coming for a few months, Noelle for nearly a year. She'd started after her divorce, aching for community, for anything stable and kind. Somewhere between bites of scrambled eggs and tales of burnt toast disasters, their laughter slowed into something gentler. The topic turned, softly, naturally, to the topic that hovered like a shadow, their former marriages. She said she needed to find herself, Isaac said, his voice quiet, gaze fixed on his plate. "I guess I just hoped I'd be worth being found." Noelle looked down at her coffee cup, nodding slowly. "Mine didn't say that. He just, slowly erased me until there was no one left to find." They sat in silence for a moment, not the awkward kind but the shared kind, the kind where two people realize they've met someone who understands a little of what they've been through. "I don't really know why I'm here," Isaac admitted. "I keep thinking maybe she'll come back. Maybe this was just a season. And I keep thinking maybe I wasn't built for marriage in the first place," Noelle replied, trying to laugh, though it came out flat. "All I did was bend and shrink and follow rules I didn't make. For 24 years. Isaac looked up at her then, really looked. "You're here, though. You made it." She smiled faintly. "By the grace of God." He nodded. "That's the only reason I'm still standing." The breakfast ended. Dishes were cleared. Folding chairs scraped against linoleum floors as people milled around, lingering in small prayer circles or hugging goodbye. "I'm glad you sat here today," Isaac said. "Me too," she replied. "You made me laugh. That's no small thing these days." He offered a fist bump, boyish and shy. She bumped it gently, and they parted ways. No expectations. Just two bruised hearts, quietly encouraged. And maybe the makings of a tentative friendship. The bell above the door jingled sharply as Noelle walked into the store, brushing off the morning chill from her sweater sleeves. She paused by the time clock and slipped her name tag over her head. "Noelle. Customer care, here to help." The irony wasn't lost on her. She was good at helping. Always had been. 24 years of anticipating moods, dodging landmines, cooking dinners that never seemed quite warm enough or right enough. She had become an expert in quietly vanishing, making herself small to keep the peace. But now, no one was there to scold her if she got home 5 minutes late. No one rearranged the spice cabinet and called her scatterbrained for leaving the cinnamon next to the cumin. And no one sat on the couch ignoring her with the kind of silence that screamed louder than words. She should have felt free. Some days she did. Other days, like today, it felt like standing in the middle of a wide open field with no one coming, no one calling, no one expecting. "Morning, Noelle," came the voice of her teenage coworker, Gracie, all peppermint gum and energy drinks. "Morning, sweet girl," Noelle smiled, reaching for a roll of grocery bags and straightening a disheveled end cap of instant oatmeal. "You got your coffee?" "I got two," Gracie grinned. "Double shot." "I may fly." Noelle laughed gently, and for a moment, the heaviness lifted. She'd come to love this odd little retail rhythm, the gentle beep of barcodes, the hum of refrigerated cases, the older gentleman who bought lottery tickets and called her sunshine. Every now and then, in the pauses between transactions, she'd talk to Jesus like he was leaning on the counter beside her. Just whispering, "Lord, teach me what peace looks like when no one else is watching." Across town, Isaac was sitting in his car in a hardware store parking lot, engine idling. A bag of screws sat on the passenger seat. He hadn't gone in for them. Just needed somewhere to think. The ring was still on his finger. He hadn't taken it off, though the divorce was final 9 months ago. He told people he just hadn't gotten around to it, but the truth was uglier. He was waiting for a miracle that might never come. They had been married 14 years. Not perfect years, but real ones. Real bills. Real fights. Real holding each other after funerals and miscarriages. And then, suddenly, she was gone. Moved out. Counseling failed. Phone calls dwindled. A letter arrived. And now she lived 2 states over with a new job and, he suspected, a new someone. He still went to church. Sat near the back. Sometimes stared too long at the stained glass windows, wondering if God saw how much he was still bleeding. He thought about Noelle now and then. The way she laughed at his joke about commercials. The sadness in her smile. The strength beneath it. He never got her number. But he remembered her face. And her voice when she said, "By the grace of God." Yeah, he thought. Grace. That's what's holding us both together. He finally turned off the engine, picked up the bag of groceries and walked to the door of his forlorn-looking home. That night, Noelle sat in her small apartment, just 1 bedroom, 1 lamp, and a chipped teacup full of peppermint tea. The silence wasn't cruel here. Just unfamiliar. She curled up on the couch with her journal, her Bible open to Psalm 34. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." She underlined it. Twice. Then, slowly, with careful pen strokes, she wrote. "I thought I needed someone to complete me. But I think what I needed was space to heal. Maybe even space to become who you created me to be. Before I got buried beneath someone else's expectations. Thank you for showing me how to breathe again, Jesus. And for loving me, even when I didn't." She looked out the window. The city was asleep, and so was her loneliness. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she had to be anyone. She was just Noelle. A daughter of the king. And that was enough. The Tuesday morning shift had started the same as any other. Noelle clocked in, smoothed down her shirt, and headed to register 5. It was quiet, mid-morning lull. The kind of calm where she could hear the soft murmur of the overhead speaker playing a piano instrumental of "Great is Thy Faithfulness." She liked the old hymns better than the trendy worship music. There was something about the way the words clung to the bones, reminding her that even in quiet sorrow, God was still faithful. She scanned a loaf of bread, then a gallon of milk. "That'll be $6.18, she said gently to the woman in front of her, who handed her exact change with a grateful smile. As she placed the change in the drawer and reached for the next item, a voice cut through the noise, low, warm, familiar. "Well, hello there, young lady." Her heart paused. She looked up. And there he was. Isaac. Standing at the end of her register line with a small carton of blueberries in his hand and a sheepish, almost shy, smile on his face. It had been, what? 3, maybe 4 months since that church breakfast? Since that quiet moment over paper cups of orange juice and broken histories. For a second, she couldn't speak. All she could do was smile, a genuine, full smile that lit her whole face, something she didn't even know she still had in her. He offered her the blueberries. Breakfast of champions. She laughed and rang them up. You always eat this healthy? She asked. Only when I think I might run into someone who inspires me to do better. She tried not to blush, but the warmth crept up her cheeks anyway. That'll be $3.42. He handed her a $5 bill and waited for his change. As she handed him his change, her fingers brushed his briefly, nothing dramatic, just a whisper of contact. And it made her blink, like something inside her stirred for the first time in a long while. He moved to the side of the registers, but he didn't leave. She continued working, trying not to glance toward him. But it was impossible not to feel it, that presence, the way someone carries peace when they've been through fire and come out honest and kind on the other side. When her line cleared, she glanced over and saw that he was still standing there, casually like he was waiting for someone. And something in her fluttered. Noelle, stop, she scolded herself gently. He's nice but is probably dating someone, maybe waiting for her now. Just then, her boss, Amanda, approached with her usual shift sheet, checking of breaks and lunches. Noelle, can you head to the service desk? Time for Lisa's break. Sure, she nodded, logging off the register and stepping back for her replacement to step in. She tried not to look in Isaac's direction but caught sight of him out of the corner of her eye, just as he was walking toward the doors. Alone. Something rose up inside her making her brave. She quickened her pace and caught up with him just as he passed the self-checkout. Isaac? He turned around instantly, smile still easy. Well, hey again. Her words came out softer than she expected. How have you been? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaled slowly. Better. Some days still feel upside down, but I'm letting go more. I stopped asking God to fix the past. Just asking him to steady me in the now. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. That sounds wise. He smiled. And you? Are you staying out of trouble? She laughed and said, oh yes. Then, it's good to see you. Memories of that shared breakfast conversation still tickled her mind. A kindness and similar shared grief and pushing through to the next chapter of their lives. They both smiled. Something old and heavy lifted just a little. Well, he said, stepping back, I'll let you get back to work. When I see you, I'm definitely going to say hello. He grinned easily. Blessing the masses. She smiled sweetly then and said, that would make me very happy. They smiled and parted ways, but in her heart she smiled. A soft something stirred in her. She would ponder that later. What she knew, what settled deep and sure in her bones, was that she was no longer waiting to be chosen. She was already seen. Already loved. Already whole. And whatever came her way, or didn't, Jesus would be enough. The wind had picked up that afternoon, sending leaves tumbling across the parking lot like dancers too wild to be choreographed. Noelle stood at the service desk, helping a mother with a return on baby formula, then signing off on a rain check for a sale item that had sold out. She moved with quiet competence, grace and motion. But beneath it all, her thoughts swirled. Isaac. The way he'd smiled. The way he'd stood there, unrushed, present, as if he genuinely saw her. Not just her name tag or polite smile. But her. She shook her head and headed to the customers waiting at the service desk, and got to work. But her heart was happy. It beat softly and steadily, not in infatuation, but in recognition. A kindred soul. A gentle spirit. A man still mending, yes, but one who knew what brokenness felt like, and how God could knit something holy out of the unraveling. She clocked out just after sunset. The sky had turned lavender, streaked with gold, as if heaven had painted a promise across it. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and headed to her car, the weight of the day behind her. She didn't cry. She didn't ache. She didn't feel empty. She felt, oddly, held. That night, Noelle lit a candle and curled up in the corner of her couch. Bible in lap. Tea in hand. She flipped the pages until her eyes fell on Lamentations 3. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning, great is your faithfulness. Tears welled, but they didn't fall. She smiled. She had spent years waiting for someone to notice her. To hear her. To rescue her. But in the silence of this slow, healing season, she had found something infinitely better than rescue. She had found Jesus. Not the version she was taught to appease. Not the one used like a weapon to keep her small. But the gentle Savior who walked into her grief and sat beside her with no agenda. Who didn't need her to perform. Who whispered, "You are mine." Who was constant and loved her exactly for her. Every broken bit and tired, worried tears that sometimes fell when she was alone. In that love, she was learning to lean into. Peace hung over her with that revelation. Peace she began to wear like a robe, regardless of the storms life was throwing her way. Elsewhere, Isaac sat at a small kitchen table, staring at the grocery bag he'd set on his table. He chuckled softly to himself. Of all things. He opened his Bible to Isaiah and ran his finger across a verse that had become his lifeline. I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. He thought of Noelle's smile, the way her eyes lit up. The quiet strength that lived in her voice. He didn't know what the future held. He wasn't trying to guess. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking backward. Weeks passed. No grand declarations. No text messages or social media stuff, just life moving forward. Noelle kept showing up, at work, at her women's Bible study, in her prayer journal. And every now and then, she'd remember his words, I'm letting go more. So was she. And in the letting go, came space. In the space, came peace. Not the loud kind with fireworks and applause. But the still kind, the Jesus kind. One Sunday, late in the morning, Noelle walked into the back of the sanctuary with a bulletin in her hand and quiet hope in her heart. She didn't scan the room. She didn't sit near the door. She took her place in the middle of the congregation, next to a young mother bouncing a baby on her knee. She sang. And didn't look around. She focused inward and earnestly focused on the goodness of her Heavenly Father. Gratitude welled up within her as she thought of all the difficulties he'd gotten her through that week, difficult times balancing the well-being of her children, emotional support, feeling lonely in the small hours of the night, and 1,000 other things. She took a breath and her heart was assured that through all the hard times and difficulties, she would never be truly alone or abandoned. God had her and her family. He saw and cared and loved her. And as she was reflecting and the pastor prayed for the service, a familiar voice whispered nearby. Mind if I sit here? She opened her eyes. Isaac. With that same warm smile she was growing accustomed to. Holding a bulletin. Looking awkward and hopeful and steady. She grinned. Well, hey, and of course. She scooped her Bible off the seat next to her and he sat down easily. He grinned, suddenly happy not to be sitting alone, and they sat in silence as the pastor began his sermons on Jesus and the Beatitudes. Peace settled. No trying to impress Isaac beside her. She shut all thoughts off, other than the message. Jesus and his grace in motion. In his time and in his way, he would make the way clear, moving forward. And it would be based on his teachings and power to transform lives, in love. Epilogue. Later that day, Noelle wrote one last line in her journal. I'm not waiting anymore. Not for a man. Not for a sign. Not for someone to make me whole. I am already beloved. Already enough. And somehow, I think that's what love will recognize in me when it's time. The end. But not really, because grace never ends. Thank you for spending time with us today. If this story reminded you that healing takes time, that peace is possible, or that you are never forgotten by the one who made you, then we hope it stays with you long after the final line. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come after the quietest goodbyes. And sometimes, grace shows up in the form of a fist bump and a friendship born of shared grief. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Until next time, keep resting in the truth. You are already loved.